These days, there is so much talk and debate about the idea that it may actually cost poor people more to buy the same things that the wealthy go out and buy. In other words, it costs more to be poor. How can that be true? Let's explore. 1.5% of the world holds, 90% or more of the world's wealth. They say about 10% of us here in the US are well off, and that about 50% are middle class, right? Just, working, getting through it, doing whatever it takes to get by. That leaves what? About 39% falling into the kind of poor, poverty-stricken, underprivileged, even below working class. I mean, maybe they're working, but really, really, really struggling. And there's this whole idea, this whole conglomerate of people that says, well, it costs those people, that 39%, the poor, it costs them more to live and buy some of the same products, if not all of the same products, that the middle class and wealthy. How can this even be true? So I wanted to attack this kind of twofold, basically around two ideas. One is it true? Does it actually cost poor people more to buy things? Two, if so, why? Why would it cost them more? One argument is that the same stuff costs more, whether it's a phone, car, pair of shoes, handbag, groceries even, costs more because if you don't have the money to buy it, you're going to use what? You're going to use credit, right? You may be putting this on a credit card or some other form of credit or borrowing, and you're going to pay interest. So I guess that could be true, because if you buy a phone and let's say you walk into the phone store and you have the money, and I don't know what new phones cost, but they could cost $800 or $1,000. If you're paying $1,000 for a new phone, you're going to get that phone for $1,000, plus or minus the tax in whatever state you live in. But if you don't have the money, well, the phone company's probably going to offer you a payment plan, right? And they do a lot of this for various items that you can buy and finance. They offer you financing. So if you take the financing and maybe you put a small down, or maybe you just trade in your old phone as the deposit, what is that $1,000 phone going to cost you? It could cost upwards of $1,200 or $1,300 on a payment plan. In that case, a phone, a car, shoes, a bag, or anything you buy on credit absolutely does cost you more if you don't have the money. A second reason, though, why it could cost you more is that if you don't actually have the cash to buy something, let's say a car, you don't have the power to negotiate. Negotiating not only saves, but can even make you money, because it's money that you've already earned that now you don't have to take out of a bank account or somewhere where it may be earning interest and use it to make these payments. When you have the cash to go in and buy something for cash, you can negotiate. That means if I go in and buy a car that say is $15,000, well, I can walk in with some cash and I can start negotiating pretty hard, right? I can think in my mind that, hey, I'd love to walk out of the dealership with this car for $12,500 out the door, maybe $13,000. I know that if I throw out an offer that I can back it up. I know that whatever he comes back at me with, we can go back and forth. But if I tell him that I'm going to pay this amount, that I can actually pay that amount today. So meaning I'm going to qualify for a big discount because of the power negotiation has. If you walk into that same dealership and you're going to finance that $15,000 car, first off, you have no negotiating power. They're not going to take any less than their asking price because you don't have any of the money. As a matter of fact, they're going to charge you interest on the loan. They're going to probably get you the loan and they're going to say, look, give us a little bit of a down. Some places even do no down. And they're happy with that too, because then they get to charge interest on the entire $15,000. Whatever you go 3, 5, 6 years on that car loan at a high interest rate, you're going to pay way more than me, because I'm going to walk in, or the person who has the cash is going to be able to negotiate and buy it for cash. So they're not going to pay a penny more than what they've negotiated on that car. If you don't have the power to negotiate, meaning you don't have the money, then absolutely the items can cost a lot more. Another argument is that you can't buy in bulk. Do wealthy people buy in bulk? To a certain degree, you buy in bulk. Maybe certain products. I mean, I myself am only a fan of buying in bulk if it's a non-perishable product, paper towels, maybe things for the office like, markers, papers, pens, Food, not really. I mean, a lot of people do buy food in bulk items, but that's a perishable item for the most part. So I tend to not do that. But if you are buying in smaller amounts, then no, you're not getting a discount. You're just paying for that item one at a time. And if you're broke, then probably that's how you're doing it. You're going to the store and you're buying what you can afford that day or at that time. But another thing that costs you a lot of money in regards to purchasing items like that you cannot buy in bulk is just your choice. It's just how you buy it. I've had many tenants over the years on different properties that I've rented out, and from time to time I would stop in. They need a light bulb change, they need something fixed, they need something done, or they have an issue, and I'll literally stop by the property. And sometimes I'd get there and the husband or wife would say, oh no, my wife's out. She had to run out to 7-Eleven to get some milk, or she had to run to the convenience store to get a box of cereal or this or that. That's a choice, right? If you go to these places like a convenience store, you are choosing convenience. And that is the place where you are going to pay the absolute most for anything. Yet poor and broke people frequent these places like a 7-Eleven or a corner convenience store or the dollar store, thinking they're going to get a quick item, and they're literally paying 2 or 3 times more for the same item. So here I am thinking to myself that I'm there changing a light bulb that they say they don't have the money to replace, but they're out paying $6 for a gallon of milk, whereas you can get it at the store, the supermarket, for half price. Wealthy people, or people who plan a little bit better, choose to do exactly that. Their choice on how to spend the money and where to spend the money has to do with a bigger plan. When I go out, I plan it. I write it down. I have a list. And everything I do, I sort of do that way. If I needed something, I say, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to be out of the house. I'm going to be near that store. I'm going to stop and pick it up while I'm out. And I'm also going to go to the part of town where I'm going to get the absolute best deal. Even in supermarkets, here in Las Vegas, we've got 6 or 7 different options to choose from, probably more than that. But I know the 2 places that give me the absolute best deal on the items I buy the most. I wait, I make a list, and I go there. I do not run out for one item where it's going to cost me 2 or 3 times as much. So literally how we choose to spend our money will also dictate how much we pay and if we're going to pay more than everybody else. And if you choose convenience, most of the time you're actually going to pay more because you're not getting the most value. Poor and broke people also tend to use things like food delivery and Uber, which costs you even more. That can cost 3 times, and then you also have to give them a tip. That I just equate to laziness. Okay, if I'm going to pick up something to go, I'm going to do it on my way home from wherever I am. I'm out at my shop. I'm out at one of my businesses. I have to run an errand. That's when I choose to do it. And if I was home and I decided I wanted some Chinese food, I certainly would get in my car and just go and get it because there's plenty of places close enough. So I never use Uber, food delivery, or any kind of delivery service for that. A majority of people who are broke and struggling and are paying more for everything than everyone else do it because they don't know how to wring out a dollar. They literally don't know how to get the most out of their dollar. And I know it sometimes can seem hard to do when you're doing things like getting food from convenience store and having things delivered. That's a surefire way to guarantee that it's costing you more for the same thing and you aren't wringing out the value out of our dollar, which is dwindling every day without our help. So why spend it in excess when you don't have to? Another thing that causes the poor and broke to overpay is having to pay late fees. They're not really good at watching their bank account. Now, listen, this part of me doesn't blame you. I'm not a big fan of banks either. And most people are not. They just see it as a ripoff and some place that, gets rich on the backs of others. But the truth is, if you don't keep an eye on your bank account, on your bank card, on the money you're actually spending out of your accounts, then you're going to pay late fees and overdraft fees. This is something that the wealthy and people who keep an eye on their money don't do. They do not want to pay extra fees to a banking system that they already don't like being a part of. But this happens amongst the poor and the broke all the time. They just refuse to look at their accounts, maybe because it's a stress. You know, you don't have a lot of money and you're struggling to, funnel your checks and your income and your money into the bank, and then it doesn't seem to live there for very long. So you just don't want to look at it. So I call it the ostrich effect. You bury your head in the sand, and I could do a whole talk about that. But people literally fail to look at these things. So what happens is they end up finally getting to their bank statement or getting a thing in the mail that says you've got an overdraft, and then there's a fee. So not only do you owe them what you overdrafted, but then they charged you an overdraft fee. Another way that the banks cost the broke more is with higher fees, meaning if you're a good risk. I'll give you an example. One time I wanted to buy a van for work, right? I'm on the East Coast. I'm a young man. I'm doing my construction and I want to do some work, and I needed a new van. My old van just wasn't cutting it anymore, and it was breaking down and costing me too much money, and I wanted to go buy a new van. Well, new for me, not new, but a good used van. So I found something that was about $20,000, and it was excellent with super low miles, and it was more than I wanted to spend, but I actually had the money. From always buying like this, and I was pretty young, so I didn't have really great credit. My credit actually sucked. Someone said, you should get a loan on that van, even though you don't need it, because then they'll report that, right? They'll report that you're making these payments, and that will be something that help builds your credit. So I guess making a good payment on a car loan is one of the things that gets reported to the credit agencies, and this is how people build credit. And I said, okay, all right. I was really young, but I said, but I have the money. So it didn't make much sense to me, because I could have gone in and just bought the truck because I had saved up the money for it. But I did go to a bank. So I went to the bank and I basically said, I wanted this loan. Here's, my credit. I don't have much of it, right? I didn't have bad credit. I just didn't have much credit because I'd never shown myself spending much money. I said, what I'd like to do though is I'd like to deposit $20,000 with your bank and earn a little bit of interest, but still take out the $20,000 loan. And of course they said, what? Absolutely. Why? Because I'm a good risk. So not only did I get the loan, but I also got the best loan rate possible. And I had them waive a lot of the fees because I said, look, I have the money and I could just pay this myself, but I'm depositing the money into your financial institution, which is good for them. And I'm going to pay this loan off as quickly as possible. So I think they gave me a normal, car loan, whatever it was, 4 or 5 years, but I just paid it off within a year anyway, and I built up a little credit. Probably not as much as I could have if I just went full term, but I had the money, and the whole time I'm scratching my head going, why am I making this payment when I could just pay it off? So I paid it off within 12 months, which is kind of a rule that I think people should have even today. If you have to finance a car, if you could pay it off within 12 months, that's really good. That shows a strong backing. I built up a little bit of credit that way. But the point is that they gave me a great rate. The rate was like ridiculously low because I was a very, very low risk. When you don't have money and you're poor or broke and you go in to a bank, many times you'll get the loan. They will still actually give you the money. I mean, they want your payments coming into them in the form of high interest. So you're going to get a higher interest rate. You're going to have closing fees and all kinds of other fees that are tacked onto this because you are not a great risk. So they're going to give you the money, but it's just going to cost you more. So that is definitely a way that the poor and the broke have to pay more for the same exact thing. I find that broke people are great at buying, right? They're great at buying, meaning they're good at spending money, but they're not good at maintaining. And not maintaining the items you buy is another way that you spend more than the rich. See, when a wealthy person buys something, they value it, right? It's not about the cost of the item. It could be something very cheap. It could be a $5,000 car or a $10,000 convertible they wanted, right? They take care of it. They tend to do the maintenance, meaning if you're driving it down the road and you hear a little noise, boom, you just, take it right to the mechanic. When you're broke, you don't do that. And I understand why. Because your car just made a noise, and now taking it to the mechanic is going to cost money that maybe you don't have. And once again, you begin to stress. So you just say, it's a minor noise. It's a little thing. It's just something in my brakes. No big deal. The car's still stopping. I'm going to still go. Then what happens is the problem gets worse and worse, that by the time you do get it to the mechanic, well, it's not just brake pads anymore. Now it's rotors. So you turned a $200 job into a $600 job by letting it go and not doing the maintenance. Now, I've seen this time and time again with friends, relatives, and clients all doing the same thing, putting off a home or car repair or any other type of repair and just saying, I'll get to it later when I have money. Of course, they're still busy buying point of purchase items and maybe drinking and smoking and traveling and vacationing and paying credit card bills, and they're not maintaining their items, and eventually they just go to shite. So the point is that you also want to be good at maintaining the things you buy. Not too long ago, I was talking about this and I mentioned how I've had this pair of boots, and it was better to buy a little bit more expensive in the beginning because it lasted me longer versus buying something, cheaper that doesn't last as long. And, this even happened with a pair of work boots. I used to buy work boots all the time for work when I was in construction, and I would just plow through them in a season or two. One summer, one winter, just toss them away. They were junk. But I was always looking for the cheapest boots that I could find. Well, one day I found a name brand pair of boots, and I bought them, and they were $100, maybe just over $100. But when I do the math now, I've had these things for well over 10 years, and they're still actually in excellent shape. Like, they almost look brand new. The leather is good. I mean, they feel good. The laces are even still good, right? So if I do the math, what did they cost me? I mean, up until this point, maybe $10 or less a year. It's probably been over 10 years, maybe a dozen years I've had these boots. So whereas I was paying $20 or $30 for a pair of boots that would, be done inside of 12 months. So those boots cost me $30 a year or more. Sometimes not only maintaining your item, but buying a little bit better in the beginning, you're forced to save up. You're forced to have the money and save it and put it down on the item and have a little bit better item to begin with that costs you a little bit more, but then you devalue that over time and it ends up costing you way less than the cheaper item. Finally, I just want to close up by saying the thing that saves you the most money in life is kind of something you would never really think, but it is just education. And wealthy people put a premium on education and learning about everything, about their business, about the homes they buy, about the cars they buy. They do reviews, they look at everything, and they value it. But they really value education, because education in any area, but especially when it comes to your finances, is the number one thing that will not only get you out of poverty, but allow you to actually spend less money, because you will do the research and you will have the knowledge on how to live better with less. My name is Daniel F. Margasa. You are watching the Almost Criminal Millionaire channel. And if you enjoy learning about the topic of finances, money, and the health and wealth of your bank account, then please like and subscribe for more.